GIST, Goals, Ideas, Steps and Tasks. In this talk, Itamar Gilad will explain why opinion-based roadmaps, product backlogs and project plans are failing us, and how you can become more evidence-guided using the GIST framework. He has been at Google and Microsoft. Please welcome, with a round of applause, Itamar Gilad.
Hello, everyone. I'm a bit shocked and amazed that you don't know my framework. It's a bit disappointing. It's the afternoon, just as a kind of exercise. Show of hands, how many of you have a title product manager or product owner? How many is like a product coach or agile coach or coaching something? Designers? Design researchers, data scientists? We have a few. Something I didn't count? Business people? All right, it's safe to make jokes. Engineers? Also safe to make jokes. All right, I started as an engineer. And then after a few years, I was rising up the ranks. I switched into product. I moved to the dark side. This was in 2001. So you can kind of imagine my age based on that. And I have to tell you, since 2001, we made a lot of progress. I mean, back then, we didn't use Agile. We hardly had user research. We were burning bits into DVDs, actually, and shipping them physically. Now we have continuous deployment. A lot has improved. But I have to tell you, there's one area where I don't see that step function improvement. And that's product management, unfortunately. Especially the key function of deciding what to launch and in what order. Back then, we would put ourselves in a room, lock ourselves in a room, have a debate, discuss. There will be some bits of data flown around, and then we will decide. Today, very different. We use Zoom. But it's basically the same process, honestly. We're still basically using discussion. What's wrong with that, you might ask? Well, the problem of choosing out of 40, 50 possible ideas, which ones are the best, is a complex problem. There's a lot of moving parts in the technology, in the markets, in our organizations too. It's ambiguous. A lot of the things are not exactly as they seem. It's a problem of too little or too much information. So usually what we need, the data is not available, but we're flooded with other information. And we need to decide under time pressure. And the tool we use to deal with this is this, our brains, our judgment. And any behavioral psychologist will tell you that this class of problems are ones that our brains are particularly bad at solving. Absolutely. Instead of dealing with all the ambiguity and everything, we replace the question of what is the best idea with a question that is easier to answer. What feels right for me, to me, based on my experience, my intuition, my gut instinct. And then we have all these cognitive biases running inside, selection bias and halo effect and so many, risk aversion, that convince us that our choice is very rational. It's actually the only choice available, right? I hear all the time about must-have features. So this is kind of how we decide, unfortunately. What's wrong with that? The results. First off, the plans, the roadmaps, whatever plans we come up with, are pretty bad at predicting the reality. Execution doesn't follow the plan. And that, you would say, that's actually okay because we're agile. But even worse, the trajectory doesn't change. I see product team after product team launching, iterating, planning, executing, and they're unable to actually change the trajectory of the business, of the usage, to improve people's lives in significant ways. It's really hard to create a change. So I think we need to think of another way. And there is some hope in the horizon. Right now, we have very powerful research techniques available to us. You guys just heard from the guy in Amplitude in this room just before me. And that means that we can start using evidence. And evidence is key to help our brains. With evidence, we're able to supercharge our brains. And it's not a coincidence that science, medicine, law, all rely strictly on evidence. They don't want to trust human judgment alone to make decisions. And we need to do the same in our products. That's the key point. So what I'm here to tell you about is evidence-guided development. That's kind of the term I like to use. We're not replacing judgment with evidence. We're just improving our decision-making using evidence. And there's a lot of methodologies, and you guys know them. There's lean startups, the product discovery, design thinking, even growth hacking. They're all good. What I found when I left Google and started coaching my clients or teaching these topics is that it's a really big problem. And it goes against a lot of the kind of normative things that we're used to doing, and that, top-down decisions, output focus, all this good stuff. So what I found is it's useful to break the problem into 4 parts: goals, ideas, steps, and tasks. I'll explain all 4 now. I call it the GIST framework. But just this morning, I watched this really good session with Martin and Arne, and Martin said something very good. He said, it's not a framework, it's a mental model. And I really like this. And actually, in my line of business, you need to know when some term or phrase is out of fashion. So it's not a framework, it's a mental model. But I'm half joking, but I'm also half serious. I don't want you to see this as a process. Inside each one of these things, you can put different processes and it will still work. It's a meta framework, if you like. All right, let's jump in. Goals. Goals obviously define where we want to end up. What's the destination? What's the change we want to create in the world? And unfortunately, a lot of companies kind of mess it up. When I ask them, what are you trying to achieve? What are the outcomes you're after? In some companies, it's revenue, market share. What about the users? Anyone? NPS, raise the NPS. That covers the user section of things. And that's it. Beyond that, there are not real goals except execute the plan. That's really the goal in many of these companies. In other companies, a flood of metrics, this and that and the other, and we want all of this to improve. These are all the goals. And I have to tell you, neither of this works. Goals is about picking outcomes, but the most important outcomes. And evidence-guided companies use models in order to identify these outcomes. You may recognize here the flywheel of Amazon. There's funnels, there's business model canvas. There's a lot of ways to create models. I'll show you one that I think is broadly applicable and can be used in a large number of companies, and that's the value exchange. So our core mission is to deliver value to our market, to our customers, our users, even our partners, and to capture value back. Delivering value means addressing their needs at a reasonable cost, and capturing value could mean a lot of things: revenue, market share, attention, data, whatever it is that we need in order to grow our business and to build better products and to deliver yet more value to the customers. All of this is not new. The product is the means to an end. It kind of helps us deliver value. It's the vehicle. It's also usually the reason for them to pay us back. In order to make sure that our value exchange is working, we need to make it measurable. And there are 2 key metrics here. One is pick one of the business metrics. Not all of them, not all 50. Just one that is the most important. Let's say revenue. This year, it's really important that we hit 250 million in revenue. Why? Because we need to go to the next level in, I don't know, in our IPO. Or maybe it's about profit, or maybe it's about market share. But pick one. The other ones are important. We'll put them aside. That's a strategic decision. We will monitor them. But there's one that is the most important. Even more important, probably, for product organizations is the North Star metric. Probably most of you are familiar with the term. It broadly explains how we measure the amount of value we deliver to the market. In WhatsApp, for a very long time, it was about number of messages sent. Why? Because every message sent is a little increment of value. So both to the sender and the receiver. It's free, it can be rich media, etc. So if in year 1 we delivered 1 billion messages, and in year 2, 2 billion, we can roughly say we double the amount of value we created. Amplitude that we just saw here, their North Star, at least the official one they say, is weekly learning users. How many users of Amplitude, if you don't know them, they're an analytics tool, have found something so useful, an insight in the tool, that they decided to share it with at least 2 other people, and those people consumed it. So counting these users and the number of insights kind of shows how much value Amplitude is creating. You get the picture. Once you have these 2 top metrics, you will realize they're pretty hard to change. They're slow to change. A lot of things influence them. So it's good to start breaking them into sub-metrics and break those further. Sometimes they're called input metrics. And then start identifying where we want to focus. Because we don't want to improve the entire tree all the time. What we want to do is focus the organization, and that really comes from strategy. In our yearly goals and the company goals, we want to say, our churn is 5%. We set the target that this year, by the end of the year, it will be 3.5%. Let's figure out how to do this. Maybe you, 3 teams, you work together. Maybe it's a goal that we want to ask all product teams to work on and to interpret in their area. Maybe we will create a new team, organic or virtual, just to tackle churn. Whatever it is, we map the goals into the org rather than create the goal from the org structure. Right? At the end of the day, we want to have a very concrete, very small set of key results or outcomes that everyone is working towards. Once we have that, we can start talking ideas. And ideas are like the roads along the way that take us to the goal. There are many options, there are many ideas, many initiatives, product changes. But there's a problem. Most of them are actually not going to work. We know this from A/B experimentation. This is Ronnie Kochavi. He started A/B experimentation in Amazon back in the 90s. Then he worked for a long time at Microsoft. Then he worked at Airbnb. And along the way, he is also a PhD. He published articles and books on A/B experimentation. And he collected results from many, many companies. And the results are pretty clear. In the best case scenario, 1 in 3 ideas actually create any sort of positive measurable outcomes. And in many cases, it's far less than that, 1 in 10. If that's the case in your company right now, 90% of what's in your roadmap and in your product backlog is something you shouldn't do. It's not going to create anything except waste. And these are not small potato companies. These are serious people that really thought long and hard about these ideas, and still their ideas turned out to be bad. So that's a tough reality, combined with the fact that we can't actually predict which ideas are good or not, because our brains are not wired up correctly. Even a computer will not be able to do it. It means that we're creating a lot of waste constantly. What's the solution? So science has been battling with similar issues for a very long time. This is Linus Pauling, one of the discoverers of the DNA, and one of the only people who won 2 Nobel Prizes. What he has to tell us is, if you want to have good ideas, you must have many ideas. Most of them will be wrong, and what you have to learn is which ones to throw away. Very simple. It's just statistics. Try out a lot of ideas. So here's how we bring this into our organizations. We let the ideas come in, and then we start filtering them. First through evaluation. I will show you how this is done in a second. And that will just get a lot of ideas parked. We put them to the side. We say, right now, we're not focusing on those. Some ideas that we believe in more go into validation. We put them in front of users. We test the results. And that creates evidence. And using the evidence, we can reevaluate the ideas and, again, park some more, and then bring others, or the survivors, back into validation. Then we will say about some ideas, good enough. We have enough confidence in them. Let's go and build them. Let's move into delivery. But even during delivery, even if we start rolling it out, we might discover new evidence, and we might decide to unroll it or to roll it back or to change it in some way. And eventually, some ideas will be launched. And there's a much higher likelihood that these are the good ones. These are the 10% rather than, a random selection of the distribution. How do we evaluate ideas? There are many ways. I usually teach ICE, which is very common in the industry, but also a bit controversial. If you don't know ICE, for every idea we assign 3 values: impact, confidence, and ease. Each one is in the range of 0 to 10. You can use t-shirt sizes if you prefer or not. And then we multiply the numbers. But I can tell you that this blue column, the I-score themselves, are the least useful part of this whole thing. Don't really expect you can just sort by I-score and this will reveal the best ideas. This is a lot of guesswork, and really the I-score is just, at best, a hint. What you can do is, if you need to create a lot of impact, you can sort by the level of impact. If you want to reduce risk, you can sort by confidence. I will explain in a second. If you need something quick, you can sort by ease. It kind of shows you how the ideas are distributed. Impact basically answers the question, if this idea is successful, how much will it impact or improve one of our key results or the North Star metric, whatever it is that we're aiming for, and it's a guess. Ease is how easy or hard is it going to be. So if it takes 3 weeks to launch completely, great, very easy, I'll give it a 9. If it takes 60 person weeks, not easy, I'll give it a 2. Why? Because that's the velocity of my company. That's what we are able to do. But again, these are guesses. And that's why we need the third element, which is confidence. Confidence basically tries to answer the question, how sure are we that these guesses are right? And there's only one way to answer this question, and that's to look at evidence. What do we have in support of the idea that actually confirms that our assumptions are true? So there's a lot of forms of evidence. One form of evidence is we talk to a few customers and they say, yeah, we think so. And another is testing. And I found it really hard to balance all of those. So I created a tool, this colorful tool called the confidence meter. And it basically tries to evaluate the available evidence and give you a confidence score that you can put into the I-score. So it works like a thermometer. It goes from this blue area, which is very little confidence, all the way to the red area, which is high confidence. The top dark blue area is opinions, your own personal opinion. If you think it's a great idea, you're really convinced, 0.01 out of 10. If you created a pitch deck, if you connected it to some, the metaverse, buzzwords, Web3, the strategy of the company, congratulations, another 0.05. There are so many bad ideas that are based just off these things. Those are opinions, let's be honest. So the tool will not give you a lot of score for those. If you present this to your colleagues, to managers, to experts, they review it, they don't find flaws in the idea, they're in support, harder test, you get a little bit more boost of confidence. If you test it on paper, you do some funnel analysis, some back-of-the-envelope calculation, and the idea doesn't die, and a lot of ideas actually die already at this level, harder test, so you get a little bit more confidence. If you find anecdotal evidence, you talk to a few customers and they said, yeah, we will be interested in this idea. You looked at the competitors and one competitor has it. By the way, if companies like an idea and the leading competitor has it, usually that's the end of the discussion. Let's build it. Anyone ever experienced this phenomena? Has it worked for you? I've done it too, don't worry. So that's anecdotal evidence. That's still low confidence. But at least it tells you that someone outside the building thinks like you. If you find market data, it's supported by a lot of data points in your data, or you ran surveys, or you've done deep competitive analysis, that's actually stronger evidence yet. That's medium-low. And really, to reach the high levels of confidence, you need to test your ideas, and there's multiple levels of test. I will show you in a second. And for very simple ideas, just minor design changes here or there, changing things in the settings page, whatever, you don't need to go all the way up there. You can stop at medium, low confidence and launch them and just track them. If they create something really bad, unlaunch them. But for most bigger ideas, you need to reach at least to the red area. Confidence of 3 out of 10 or more. So that's the I scores. The next level of GIST is steps. We want to create kind of crossroads along the project development where we can test whether or not our assumptions are true or not. The common way to develop is to pick an idea and to just go all in, develop it, and then we'll see what happens. So I'll tell you what happens, 2 things. First, it takes twice as long as you expected it, actually. That's just normal. And second, chances are that if you actually test and you don't just celebrate the launch, you'll discover you got one of the 9 bad ideas rather than the 1 in 10 good ideas. So we're kind of playing the odds. It's a roulette. Much better, of course, is to do this. We structure the project around learning milestones. So we build something very small, an MVP, a minimal thing. We test it with users, and we learn. And what we learn enables us to adjust the idea. That's why the arrows are changing direction. We pivot, we can park the idea, we can decide this idea is not good. And that's actually what happens with most ideas. You don't need to go through 5 steps to determine this. It becomes obvious pretty soon. We find new ideas, better ideas, we switch. If you are lucky, you will launch eventually, and what you will launch is actually much more profound, much better than what you started with. That's the process. I thought of a name for these arrows. What's each one of those? There are many projects or activities. Experiments I don't like so much, so I invented a name for them. They're called steps. It's not the best name in the world, but it fits in GIST. What can I do? So steps. These are steps. Each one of those is steps. Sometimes we can run multiple steps in parallel. It's not just linear the way it's shown. What kind of steps do we have available to us? So I started mapping them out. And by the way, what you're seeing here and everything I'm showing you, there are resources you can download from my site. I'll give you a link later. So I created this kind of map of various forms of idea validation, from the very cheap and shallow, they don't require any building or even data collection, through to fact-finding, tests, early tests are fakes, and then we start building more evolved version of the idea, experiments, which for me are about A/B testing in various forms, and even the launches, the releases can be tests. So I have a whole ebook that kind of explains this whole thing for you guys to download later. The last layer of GIST is tasks. Tasks is about actually doing the work. I mean, all this evolved work we've done will not happen unless the engineers, the designers, the people that actually create value do something. So tasks is about having those people actually involved in the whole process. Unfortunately, I see in company after company that the developers are actually kind of detached. There's the planners, the people who are kind of involved in the planning, executives, stakeholders, senior product managers, and they kind of think about the business goals and in terms of quarters. While these people at the bottom, they think about, sprints, Scrum, tickets, user stories. It's like 2 separate worlds. Who connects the dots? That person in the middle, the product manager, that is now also known as product owner. That person, through the backlog and a lot of legwork, really, a lot of meetings, a lot of stand-ups, a lot of deliverables, kind of feeds the agile machine, kind of translate the roadmap into whatever the agile team needs to develop. And the whole picture is not very agile, I'm sorry to say, and it's a lot about output rather than outcomes. So how do we change this? So one way to do this is by involving the team in all 4 layers of the GIST. And one way to do this is through a GIST board. So you start, it could be a physical board or a digital board, and you basically put the goals, the key results that the team has, and usually not more than 4 per quarter. And those can be both product key results, but also engineering key results, absolutely important. And next to them, you put the ideas we're working on, and next to those, the steps we're currently executing. And it's really important to involve the team both in building the board the first time, although the leads, usually the PM, the engineering lead, the UXer, are active in managing the board. It's good to meet with the team every week or every other week for half an hour and discuss this. It creates so much context. It reminds them about the goals and how we're doing, how much we have to catch up in order to achieve the goals. It reminds them the ideas, and then there's a very useful discussion about the steps that then flows very naturally into Kanban or into Jira, or whatever it is that you guys are using. If you do all of this, I would argue it kind of breaks the walls. The developer now doesn't live in the dark, and they kind of understand that the tasks, the things that they manage in Jira or in Kanban, are actually connected to steps. Mini projects, in a few weeks from now, we will give this to 20 users, to 200 users, at this level of scope and quality. These are the results we're going to collect. And that person is responsible for also running the experiment, not just for developing and delivering and moving on to the next task. There are now discoverers, not just engineers and designers. And they understand the ideas, because it's in their idea bank. And maybe those are ideas that they proposed. And they should also understand the goals and be involved in setting the goals and commit to them. And on the flip side, those people at the top, the business manager, etc., they don't need to lock themselves in rooms and decide on ideas. Because really, to be honest, they're not equipped to actually decide which ideas are the right ones. What they do need to do is work on the goals. Their inputs is very important. And then enable the team to run through ideas, but in a very transparent way. So those people need to understand which ideas are being discussed, where their idea is in the list, how does it stack up, what results came out from the steps. They're really interested in that. It really engages them. They can come and help you interpret. They can say, yeah, now that I see this, I realize my idea was not so strong. Don't tell them about the tasks. They don't care about Jira and all this stuff. But now they kind of understand what you guys are doing, because a lot of time they're in the dark. They're really baffled by what the engineering team is doing. And I would argue that the person in the middle, the PM, also has a much more meaningful role right now. That person is driving the process and is focused on customers and on customer goals and about building high-impact products that deliver value and capture value back.
Itamar, if we want to take any questions, you should finish up.
We just finished. Thank you.
Perfect.
So, please visit, and you can see a lot of the things I mentioned in ebooks and templates. Questions, please. Sorry for the
Thank you very much. Big applause, please, for Itamar. Time for questions. Maybe I have the first question. Is there a use or a case where you would say, don't use the GIST framework?
I think in cases where the culture is completely behind, I mean, very, very traditional organizations, strict siloing, there's delivery teams and business teams deciding on everything, top down. It's too much of a jump, maybe. You need to work on the culture a bit. You need to build a product organization, and then you're ready to start the transition.
More questions?
I think.
I have another one over there.
Very disappointing, if no questions.
It was just a very good talk, I would say. Hi, what's your name and your question, please?
Hi, I'm David. I'm the product owner for the Quickly mobile app, and I was wondering how many companies have actually implemented this framework?
Good question. So the question was, how many companies have implemented this framework? Exactly as I described it to the letter, I think very small number, because no one actually implements any process to the letter, including Scrum, by the way, including everything. Companies that adopted parts of it, there's quite a few. I don't know of all of them. I meet, like in conferences like this, people come to me and say, yeah, we're using your confidence meter, we're using your ICE approach. So I think it's in the thousands, but from those I coach usually, or the ones that come to my workshops, usually the implementation rate is pretty high, and most of them keep using it for quarters or years later, as much as we're in touch. But I have to say, there's no like scientific research behind this. So like, I cannot prove to you that this works.
More questions? Oh, just two. Next.
They're easy for you.
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. Loved it. I'm Julia from SAP, and I have one question. Could you help me define impact?
Impact is the sum of value we create, the total amount of value we deliver and the total value we capture. And that's why I like metrics. You can sum it up basically by your top 2 metrics, essentially. You can come up with, these are not the only sort of value we want to create. We also need to create value for our employees, for the environment, for the communities we work in. So you could also sum those up together. But generally speaking, is how much value we create and how much we capture. Did this answer the question? More or less. All right.
You have now the chance to grab Itamar and bother him further with your questions. I would say thank you very much for that very interesting framework. Big round of applause, please, for Itamar.
Thank you.